What is up, Planeswalkers? Theoric6 back with some more speculation for the open beta in Magic the Gathering Arena. As I said yesterday, these videos are simply deck tech predictions for the decks that I'm going to try to make first and foremost in the open beta for Magic Arena when Guild of Ravnica launches. Yesterday was Zombies, today is Bolas Control, and tomorrow is going to be Sultai Muldrotha. Yeah, I mean, pretty much this deck was a lot more difficult to build than the other two, and I think the reason for that is I'm really used to making mid-range decks. However, I'm not really used to trying to make a good control deck, and what I did try to do is make all three of these decks that I'm showcasing like actually good. So, you know, this has like draw spells and counter spells and like threats, but I'm just not sure like if any of them are correct to be playing. Anyway, I guess I'll just jump into it, and I'll start with my counterspell package. I'm running 2 Syncopate, because Syncopate is just good. It scales very well. You can use it early game if you need to, you can use it late game if you have to, and it exiles, which is very important. We're running 2 Essence Scatters. The reason we're running only 2 Essence Scatters is because we do have creature removal, so we don't always need to be countering creatures, and the reason we're running Essence Scatters and not negates in the main deck is essentially because I expect creatures to be something I need to counter more often, and I can, if I am running against control, they still do have creatures for me to counter something like Dream Eater or opposing Nicol Bolases, things like that. So that's why I'm running those. Sinister Sabotage is it's a counterspell with Surveil. I don't know if it's like actually good enough to be played in the deck, but like the Surveil is fine, and it does just counter a spell. It counters any spell that I want countered. So I'm going to try with 4 of these in the deck, essentially replacing Disallow. But time will tell whether or not this card's good. Luckily, it is only uncommon, so I don't have to worry if it's like bad. I didn't really sacrifice too much in crafting for it. Then we'll move on to our creature removal. We have 2 Shivan Fires. Shivan Fire is very similar to Syncopate in that it's flexible. You're able to take out a 1 or maybe 2 drop against more aggressive decks, or you can go ahead and use 5 mana in order to take out like a medium threat from some of the more mid-range decks. Lava Coil just has the 4 damage. However, it's not instant, which is one of the reasons we're only running 2 of them. And it does allow you to exile the creature. However, I'm not entirely sure how relevant that'll be. I do know that there are a couple of dice triggers that are going to be important. There's the 3-mana 3/2 Zombie Knight, which is important. There's the Selesnya uncommon card that when it dies, you make 2/2 like Vigilant Elves or something. And that's strong, but I don't know how strong it'll be. I do think it's going to be strong. Not sure exactly how strong. However, it's worth running essentially in place of a Braid. Unfortunately, it doesn't hit like artifacts like a Braid did, so there might be situations in which Lava Coil just needs to be removed for something, but Lava Coil is, I think, a relatively strong card. And then, of course, we're running through Vraska's Contempt. If there's a creature and we need to get rid of it, or there's a Planeswalker and we need it to go away, Vraska's Contempt will help us, and it'll gain us some life. It's a staple card for a reason. Then we'll have like our kind of utility-esque things. We're running 2 Search for Azcanta. Not terribly important, since we aren't running Scarab God or Torrential Gearhulk, since we no longer have access to those cards. However, it is still fine just dumping things in our bin, because even if we dump something like a Chemister's Insight, we can jumpstart it later, just in case that's not the exact card that we need at that very moment. The ability to search for removal with the flipped version is helpful. I definitely see this card being one of the earliest cuts if I end up just not needing Search for Azcanta. It is something to do early. However, usually you want to be making sure you're controlling the game early, so not entirely sure if this card's even worth running. Easily one of the earliest cuts, but I think it's a strong card, like in a vacuum. So 3 Thought Erasures. This card's real strong. I didn't think it was going to be this strong, but you don't really need to be having like a discard effect on 1. The fact that this hits anything except a land, obviously, is real strong, and you get to Surveil. This card feels like one of the best cards in the deck. It is a sorcery, which, you know, is important. It does mean potentially you're going to be putting your shields down, but I think if you learn how and when to play this card, I think it's real strong. You know, if you're playing on 4 with Essence Scatter up, you can easily Thought Erasure into Essence Scatter, something like that. Turn 5, Thought Erasure into Sinister Sabotage. I think this is a very strong card. I do feel like maybe the deck needs a little bit more value out of the Surveil, since we do have, you know, Search for Azcanta, essentially Surveil, Thought Erasure, and Sinister Sabotage, but maybe just having the ability to say, I don't need this card is enough. Not sure. And then finally we go on to our threats. We're running 4 Nicol Bolas because this is a Nicol Bolas deck, and I want to run 4 Nicol Bolas. This card is just like bread and butter. If you need to, you can play it on 4 against something like an aggro or mid-range deck that you really need to block. Against control, you know, if this resolves, at the very least, you're getting a card out of their hand, and at the most likely, you are forcing them to use 2 cards, you know, one that they discarded and then an actual removal spell on this card. This card is, I still think, very back-breaking against a lot of matchups, and it's the reason I'm running this deck, really. We're running 3 Ralzerics. Essentially, I need to make sure I have a certain amount of ways to win the game, and this card seems fine. It is just like Surveil, essentially. Like, you're looking at the top 2, you put one in your hand and then the other on the bottom, or excuse me, in the graveyard. So it's not terribly strong. You can like use its -3 to act as removal, and its -8 will just like win the game. I've heard people say it's very strong. I'm not super convinced. I haven't obviously been able to play with it yet, but I do think it's worth at least testing out. Especially because we get one for free for being in the closed beta. And then last but not least, Dream Eater. Dream Eater's just a strong card. It's a high Surveil. You get to tempo bounce something. It's a flash card. It has flying, which means your opponent's going to have difficulty blocking it, for example. It's just a fantastic strong card as essentially a replacement for Torrential Gearhulk, really. Gearhulk's purpose was to be a flash beater that was able to respond to something your opponent does, and this essentially does the same thing. It can only respond to things that are already in the field, but it's still pretty good. Moving on to our mana base. Yeah, I mean, essentially we're just trying to make sure we have certain numbers of things. You know, we want to make sure we're able to have Shivan Fire on turn 1, while also being able to run Thought Erasure on turn 2 into like Sinister Sabotage 3 and Vraska Contempt 4. So, you know, we want to make sure we're running that. So we're running a lot of rare lands, and that's fine. I definitely suggest trying to craft highly for the rare lands. I don't think it was nearly as important in closed beta, but if you're trying to be competitive, definitely give these a craft. Since I'm going to be running the Muldrotha deck, I'm likely going to be crafting for Watery Graves and Drowned Catacombs really early, just because it goes into both decks. So. And this is like the weird maybe board. I watched an SCG versus series video, Star City Games, for those of you who don't know, where the Grixis control deck was like kind of mid-rangey, a lot more red and black than blue. It didn't focus nearly as much on countering things. It focused a lot more on destroying cards and having like nice strong turns. So it used Dragon Swords and Spitflame in conjunction with the 4 Nicol Bolases to kind of just like get a little bit of value there. I think it's a fine package, you know, running like 4 Dragon Swords and like 3 Spitflames or something like that, because it gives you additional value on each cast of your Nicol Bolas. I think it's strong, but I do like the counterspells version of control, so I just wasn't able to fit it in. It's possible that the counterspells version is just not as good, and I might end up switching over to the like Dragon's Horde Spitflame version. So, and then of course Doom Whisper. It's good. Don't get me wrong. It's really good, but I just prefer the other threats. If Ral turns out to like, I like Planeswalkers. That's why I chose Ral over this. If Ral turns out to be not good, play Doom Whisper, right? I assume that that's just like the other good threat. Like Nezahal, you know, technically is fine, but Doom Whisperer has the sweet Surveil. And the thing is, again, I just have to figure out like what the purpose of Surveil is in this type of deck. So, yeah, I mean, these are meant to be real short videos, just me explaining the reason I'm running specific cards. If you have any questions about why I'm running this or not running this, let me know in the comments. I totally forgot to say that yesterday, but yeah. I'd like to thank Easy Mode, Chris, DizzyFam, Radberry, Daniel, Flowerchild, Chow83, for supporting me on Patreon. Your support means I'm going to be able to build these decks quicker than I otherwise would. It also means that I'll be able to build viewer requests whereas I might not if it weren't for your guys' support. So if you would like to join them in supporting the channel, feel free to find the link in the description below and go and hop on Patreon. Yeah, I hope you guys liked this kind of predictive video. If you did, go and tap that like button, add a subscription to your mana pool, and cast a comment to the comment section down below about what you're looking for as your first deck in Guilds of Ravnica. Until next time, all will be one.